lovely humans of the interwebs. My name is Taylor Gonzaga, if you do not know, and I am the artistic director and founder of Opera Cecilia, a company made by and for emerging artists and local talent. We're kind of nomadic, but we're mostly based out of the Pacific Northwest, and we love all genres of music. Please do not hesitate to like and subscribe and click the notification bell if you enjoyed this content so you get notified of more. Help our channel grow, help our company grow. We have a performance of Messiah by Candlelight, which is excerpt from Handel's Messiah. We're doing a virtual version, and electronic tickets will be available starting at the beginning of December. And as always, our inaugural cinematic movie opera production of Gluck's Orfeo ed Euridice has also premiered and is also still available for purchase. And you can get that by clicking the link to my webpage for Opera Cecilia attached to my own performer website in the description below. We make reaction videos through this Artistic Director React series that is kind of to all genres of music across the board. Anything from jazz and contemporary music to oldies and rock, even of course opera, classical music, art song, everything in that realm as well. This is kind of a variety channel when it comes to reaction videos, and it's been super fun to dive into some absolutely incredible artists on this channel. I'm a huge fan of Norwegian artists, so I've done a lot of those like Susanne Sundfør, Aurora. I recently did a video on Angelina Jordan, and my husband did an amazing video actually on Adele, who's an artist out of the UK, as you all know, because she's super huge. So go give that video some love, because it kind of didn't make it into the algorithm because it was blocked for a while, and it just got released to the public after a copyright dispute and all that craziness. We've reacted to opera divas like Maria Callas and Lisa Oropesa, and our divos as well, such as Luciano Pavarotti. So a huge variety on this channel, and I hope you enjoyed this video. This is actually a brand new artist for the Opera Cecilia YouTube, but I am super excited to do this because not only does she have my name, but she's absolutely like one of the most legendary female artists in the game right now. She's shattered so many world records with the success in her career, and she is, in my opinion, one of the best songwriters out there as well. That is none other than T-Swizzle, Taylor Swift. I don't know if like anyone else calls her T-Swizzle except for my husband and I, but for some reason we've always called her that in our household. I definitely have albums of hers and phases of her career that I like or enjoy more than others, and I know that she is not a celebrity that is without her controversies. I overall think that she is a strong woman in this industry. She's extremely business savvy. She seems like a wonderful person. She goes out of her way to have an intimate, loving relationship with her fan base, with the people who support her music. She's gained a huge following because of that, and I actually think that her vocals are really, really cool and unique and have improved massively over the course of her career. In the beginning, I feel like sometimes she was a little bit nervous on stage and a little bit more shaky, and now whenever I see her performing live, I feel like, man, she's really grown and that voice has really stabilized, especially that nice clean belt. It's so cool to have seen the progression of her career and all the things that she's doing for the industry. The Folklore era, one of her most recent albums that she released, in my opinion, it's her best body of work from the Folklore album. I think Evermore is a very close second. The reason why I love Folklore so much is because I think it leans so heavily into her songwriting abilities. The entire album gives off a very ethereal mood, and that's just something that my own tastes really enjoy. I kind of tend to lean toward folksier music, toward ethereal music, atmospheric, alternative pop type of music when I'm listening to contemporary songs. She's just somebody that I've always admired. I think Taylors are pretty great. I might be a little biased because my name is actually Taylor, even though some people refer to me as Cecilia too, because that's my company's name, Opera Cecilia. So if you want to refer to me as Cecilia as a nickname, that's totally fine as well. Today we will actually be doing a music video analysis and reaction to Cardigan, which is one of the hit singles from her Folklore album, and one of my favorite pieces on the album as well. We're going to start with a couple articles. I found one really, really cool source called the Pop Song Professor that kind of dives into the meaning behind the lyrics, dissecting all of the different parts of the lyrics in Folklore and all of the messages. Taylor Swift has gotten flack, in my opinion, very sexist, misogynistic flack in the past for writing about exes in her personal life in her songs. I think all artists have a right to do that. Do I think that maybe some of the things she did in her teen years, putting people on blast in talk shows or things like that, maybe that was a little much, and she's even admitted to that in time. But like, honestly, for somebody who's growing up as a teenager in the spotlight and you're dealing with exploitation up the wazoo, I don't blame her for having had moments where she may have stepped a little bit too far across the boundary. But as far as her songwriting is concerned, like, she's, as an artist, has every right to write about her personal life experiences. And this point has been made multiple times in many other videos about her. But men don't get punished for that. Only women do in the industry. I actually really admire Taylor Swift for standing her ground on that issue throughout the course of her career. I also really think that it's cool that she went a different direction with this album. I remember hearing in some interviews with her that she was like, I had to kind of step away for the sake of my own mental health from talking about my own experiences, and I kind of wanted to write things that were like legends and folklore or myth, stories about people that she's encountered or environments she's encountered in her life. And that's kind of what the Folklore album is about. I love that storytelling element to each of these pieces. To Taylor Swift, it started with imagery, which was a part of an Instagram post she actually made about this album. Visuals that popped into my mind and piqued my curiosity, she says, stars drawn around scars, a cardigan that still bears the scent of loss 20 years later. The young woman in Cardigan who is haunted by the memory of her first love's infidelity is not Taylor, but a character named Betty. Taylor's latest album is not as autobiographical as her previous albums have been. For Folklore, she has chosen to primarily tell stories that either belong to others or to characters that she has created. The result is a beautiful and melancholy album that deals with themes of loss, love, regret, death, rage, and growth. This is a little bit of a commentary on the lyric, "When you are young, they assume you know nothing," which is actually one of the most repeated lyrical lines in the song, which obviously shows that that was an important line for Taylor Swift to convey the message of to her audience. Cardigan is one of 3 songs believed to be a part of what Taylor calls the Teenage Love Triangle trilogy. Cardigan is the first, written from the perspective of the girlfriend who is cheated on. August is the second and follows the other girl who James, the boyfriend, cheats with. Betty is the conclusion and tells the story through the eyes of James. Betty is also the song that tells us the names of the characters. So consummate storyteller here for sure. And I love all the Easter eggs she leaves with her fans and all of these like intricate web of storytelling that she wants to do in each of her pieces. It's so fun as a reactor and as an analyzer to flesh all of this out. Go on the nerdy journey with me. Vintage tea, brand new phone, high heels on cobblestones. When you're young, they assume you know nothing. She's basically listing off all of these things that contribute to the melancholic mood of the song. The first verse sets the mood of teenagehood. This idea of sensual politics, which she mentions in the song, could refer to the freshness of the political world to someone just entering it, or it could be a reference to the complicated social politics of high school. I love this idea of the term sensual politics being like, oh shoot, I'm a teenager, I'm starting to learn about the world's issues for the very first time. And that's all very seductive because as a teenager, you're often longing for personal autonomy and you're working toward that in your life. You're working toward emancipation, ultimately, at least in our society. And as a result of that, trying to find that personal autonomy, forming your own belief systems is a big part of that. The political world and social issues and all these things you're learning about in school or as you age, as you progress in your life, all of that's very tantalizing to somebody who wants to form their own identity. And that has a lot to do with your opinions and your beliefs around these issues. When you are young, they assume you know nothing is one of the most repeated lines in the song, as I said before, and is used to highlight how much Betty knows about love and pain. She has unfortunately become very experienced with both despite her young age. And I think it's important for us to realize that young people have gone through a lot in their lives in many cases. And just because you are young does not mean that you haven't been through really, really difficult things. Taylor Swift, especially being somebody who kind of grew up under a microscope in the industry, has been exposed to some very difficult life experiences as a result. Of course, she's also been exposed to a massive amount of privilege, and that's not something to be denied. I don't think that's something she would deny, but that came with a price. The price took a toll on her mental health for quite a long time. She writes with the wisdom from those experiences. But I knew you dancing in your Levi's, drunk under a streetlight. I knew you, hand under my sweatshirt, baby kiss it better. Betty knows him truly and deeply. She has an intimate understanding of him through the moments they shared in their relationship. The past tense of knew, however, means that things have changed. And baby kiss it better is a reference to what he did to her once, according to this article. The refrain, when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed, you put me on and said I was your favorite. So the character of Betty often felt forgotten and like she was second class to those around her. Maybe she was bullied in school, and James helped her to feel seen. And so when that relationship eroded away, became broken, that was a really, really, really difficult thing to for her to accept. She's likening these feelings of not belonging to an old piece of clothing that is found but then treasured as like a memento. It's a wonderful metaphor for any of those people that felt different or like they didn't belong and then found a lot of validation and belonging in a relationship very young. It's really easy to fall into the trap of depending on that external validation for your happiness, because that's what you happen to be getting it from when the rest of the world seems to not accept you for who you are. That's dangerous for somebody so young, but it's also so human to have those feelings of needing that external validation and not knowing really what to do, or looking at a failed relationship from a huge place of sadness. That external validation goes away as a result. I'm not going to dive into this entire article, but basically she's talking about like kind of this entire song is about the erosion of innocence. This erosion of this like fairy tale like atmosphere that we believe love is because of the way it's portrayed in media and movies, dissecting that and looking at it in hindsight from somebody who's been a part of a relationship that ultimately ended in heartbreak. I think this is a very interesting perspective for Taylor to be writing from, because she's experienced things like this in her life on a very public level. Songs like this show all of the wisdom that she's gained from those experiences and how much she's grown as a person over the years. Even when you are put on blast as one of the most popular people in the world, you can still feel like you don't belong in that, or that people aren't really accepting you for who you are. Because the more relevant you are in society, the more of a public figure you are in society, the more people want to assign morality to you. The more people want to write your story for you. They don't take the time to get to know who you really are behind this facade that so many other people have created of you in the media after becoming a public figure. Everybody has this strong opinion about her, and she's siphoning through all of that. Bravo to Ariel. You've done absolutely phenomenal research on this. So super cool. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was direct quotes from Taylor Swift that came from a New York Times article called Taylor Swift and the Wisdom of Youth. Folklore, the album that earned 5 of Swift's 6 Grammy nominations, is stocked with references to the specific, often denigrated insight of teenagers. This is basically Taylor Swift after being a part of that youthful teenage energy for the beginning parts of her career. She's entering kind of a new phase of her life where she's reflecting on all of it. When she was 18, Taylor Swift wrote a song called 15. Fun fact, when I was in high school, I think I was a freshman. I'm 26. I think Taylor Swift is like 30, 31. So she's older than me, but not like hugely older than me. So she was a teenager too when I saw her live in concert, which is crazy. And she sang the song 15. I think it was the Enchanted tour. I swore I was going to marry him someday, but I realized some bigger dreams of mine, she sang, sounding more like a wizened great-grandmother than a rising senior. 15 is evocative if a little sanitized. So 15 was about that kind of like the erosion of innocence that happens with a broken heart as well, but it was told from the perspective of a teenager instead of someone in their 30s that is looking back on these experiences. And I think she wrote 15 about one of her best friends at the time and her experience with a boy, if I'm not remembering incorrectly. 15 is evocative if a little sanitized. Nimble mandolin strums mimic the nervous, excited butterflies of the first day of high school as Swift sings of wide-eyed hope that one of those senior boys will wink at you and say, "You know, I haven't seen you around before." There was a certain emotional truth to the lyrics. Do several years age difference ever seem more consequential than when you're a teenager? But some older listeners were skeptical. "You applaud her skill," wrote a critic for The Guardian in a mixed review of Swift's second album. "Fearless while feeling slightly unsettled by the thought of a teenager pontificating away like Yoda." I don't know how I feel about that commentary by that reviewer. I would not consider her album Fearless or anything that she's written about her insights on life or her relationships pontificating. I think that's kind of a little bit patronizing. She's kind of been the victim of a lot of these type of comments throughout her entire life because of her seeming innocence when she was in her teenage years. I think a lot of us really, really underestimate youth. That's why I kind of like the when you're young, they assume assume you know nothing line in her song. She just was living most of her life vastly underestimated because of her age. She had a lot of wisdom and insight to give to the world, and so do a lot of other teenagers. Just look at Angelina Jordan's first single that had a lot of wisdom and insight about dealing with death and loss. Maybe we should start empowering the next generation instead of patronizing them. Things that make me salty. Not empowering youth is one of them, making them feel like they don't have a legitimate opinion just because they're young. Yeah, I know they lack some life experience that maybe older people have gone through, and I'm not going to discount that, but God, just like let them speak, let them talk about their insights, because that's how they process them. That's how they become confident in their abilities to discern these difficult feelings and these difficult life experiences later into adulthood. And I'm still young, saying it from the perspective of somebody that is a woman and that is young in her industry, also feeling sometimes like my opinions aren't taken seriously. So that is a personal issue for me, but I am definitely not the only young person that has experienced that, no matter what background you come from. Swift, now 31, sings "When You Are Young, They Assume You Know Nothing" on Folklore, an LP that is both compositionally mature and braided throughout with references to the specific, often denigrated wisdom of teenagers. By the end of that song, Cardigan, the narrator has excavated such a heap of florid but emotionally lucid memories that she must conclude with the force of a sudden revelation: I knew everything when I was young. Though it's not as flashy a topic as exes, fame, or A-list celebrity feuds, age has long been a reoccurring theme in Swift's work. A numerology enthusiast with a particular attachment to 13, Swift has also released a handful of songs whose titles refer to specific ages: 7, 15, and of course 22. The chatty Red hit, on which she summed up that particular junction of emerging adulthood as feeling happy, free, confused, and lonely at the same time, which if that ain't a mood, I don't know what is. Like her contemporary Adele, Swift seems to enjoy time-stamping her music, sometimes presenting it like a public-facing scrapbook that will always remind her what it felt like to be a certain age, even if with their millions of fans and armfuls of Grammys, neither of these women is exactly typical. They're going through their own lives, and yeah, I know that there's a lot of privilege that comes with like being a massive public figure as well, and they're very, very wealthy women, both Adele and Taylor, but like sometimes I feel like mentioning their privilege automatically discounts their life experiences, no matter what their monetary or class status might be. Yes, we should take privilege into account. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. It's like thrown in their faces like, oh, you're rich, so you can't have any legitimate feelings. You're not allowed to feel sad. You can't feel emotions. You're making too much money to be allowed to feel emotions. Like, that's not okay. Artists are inherently very emotional and reflective people, which is why they gravitate toward creating this art, and they're not afraid to be vulnerable about their own life experiences and broadcast them publicly through their music so that other people can feel things and process these emotions with them, and therefore artists become the emotional backbone of society in many ways, whether they're providing a catharsis, an escape, or anything in between. So it's important to legitimize these feelings. Swift's critics have often seemed even more hyper attuned to her age, perhaps because precocity played such a role in her story from the beginning. At 14, she became the youngest artist to sign a publishing deal with Sony ATV. At 20, she became the youngest to win the Album of the Year Grammy. Many listeners have been fascinated with how her evolution into adulthood has or hasn't played out in her songs. People comb Swift's lyrics for allusions to sex, alcohol, and profanity as meticulously as MPAA representatives do to a borderline PG movie. Jeez. Yep, this is an interesting article. Particular attention was paid to her 2017 album Reputation, and its several mentions of drunkenness and dive bars, even though Swift was 27 when it came out. Every single time Taylor Swift does something even kind of like adult, or like what people would consider controversial for a teenager, but remember, like, this is a woman in her 20s and 30s. She does normal things that most normal people do at least once or twice in their lives, especially when they're a little bit younger. And she gets blasted for it when, like, those same people that are blasting her turn around and do those things on the weekends too. I could go on and on all day about how salty I am about this topic and how women, especially women that were portrayed by the media in a very specific way or started in the industry when they were teenagers as like this innocent, angelic like thing, naive, almost borderline ditzy teenager, when this is like a very intelligent, business savvy woman that is continuing to claim herself in her own art more and more as she ages. She's being patronized because, God forbid, she talks about sex in one of her songs. Sex dirty, sex bad, sex is
gross.
I have like a lot of opinions on this, and a lot of opinions on how like sex is such a taboo thing to talk about when it's such a big part of human existence. Let the woman write about her experiences. Let all artists write about their experiences, because what beautiful diversity in our art and what beautiful authenticity we get from our artists if we allow them to do that and we don't pressure them into boxes. Enough about the rant. That got more emotional than I wanted it to. I usually try to stay more on the intellectual side. Opera singers are oftentimes not in the mainstream, so their reputations are not subject to celebrity gossip magazines or anything crazy like that. And artists like Aurora are not necessarily in the mainstream enough on a global scale that they're subject to as much of that, even if they do get sung. Let's continue standing up for artists' integrity and their right to privacy and personal lives and to make their own decisions. Just support them as people and as artists and never dehumanize them, even if they're mainstream celebrities. We're gonna watch this beautiful, stunning Cardigan music video. Let's try to dive into some symbolism and vocal technique.
Vintage tea, brand new phone, high heels on, cobblestones. When you are young, they assume you know nothing. Sequin smile, black lipstick, sensual politics. When you are young, they assume you know nothing.
I wanted to stop there real quick because there's a ton of imagery that starts right away. First, to comment on the vocalism. This is a very highly lyrical song. The lyrics are a little bit more emphasized than what's happening musically. She's singing in kind of a lower speech, like what we would call tessitura in the classical world, part of the range of your voice that you're singing in. Very motivated by speech, reflective in nature. Clues the audience into the fact that this is somebody who is ruminating on past experiences. This is not someone talking about current things that are happening in their lives. Taylor Swift sort of seems to be adopting the character of Betty in this music video. And so you can imagine Betty sitting at this old piano and reflecting back on this life experience that she's had. She's reflecting back on youth, but everything around her that is surrounding her is old and seems to have been, I don't want to say damaged, but like definitely shows its age. These are old vintage articles that are all around her, whether it be kind of the dress that she's wearing has a very vintage element to it. The way that her hair is done seems like it's from a past time. The piano is old, and you saw the broken keys on the piano. You see these old kind of cobwebbed picture frames and lamps behind her, and this is a cabin that's obviously very old and is kind of not falling apart. It's not to that point yet. It seems very cozy and the light is very low and dim, but it doesn't seem like it was built just yesterday. These are things that saw youth at one point, not youthful necessarily anymore. And it's not that Taylor Swift is old by any means. She's only 31, but she's not a teen or in her 20s anymore, and she's reflecting on having passed over into a new chapter of her life. Some of a little tiny hint of escaping air in her tone, even though it's still resonant enough that you can clearly hear her diction. She wants you to pay attention to the lyrics more than her singing at this point in the song.
But I knew you dancing in your Levi's, drunk under a street light. I knew you, hand under my sweatshirt, baby, kiss it better right. And when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed, you put me on and said I was your favorite.
This is one of my favorite and what I think is one of the most magical scenes in the music video. What's so interesting is everything was so old and everything was so dark and dim in this old cabin that she was originally in at the beginning of the video. And now she's opening up and coming into this world that's teeming with new life because it's green, and green kind of a really, really lush green forest kind of gives us vibes of fertility and youth and new life springing forth from old life. I sort of took it as like it's a reflection on the fact that she's gaining new wisdom from experiences that are old, she's able to apply the life lessons that she's learned now to the future that she still has before her. I mean to use fertility in the sense that fertility is the proliferation of life. And that's something that we equate lush forests with often, because lush forests and greenery means that there's new growth and new plants growing all over the forest floor, all over the trees, all over the moldering logs that once had life themselves, and now they're hosts to other life forms. And so it's that level of layered existence where our past experiences layer on top of each other to create the future that we have. And our mind, our conscious mind, is often the sum of our most prevalent, prominent memories.
A friend to all is a friend to none. Chase two girls, lose the one. When you are young, they assume you know nothing. But I knew you, playing hide and seek and giving me your weekends. I knew you, your heartbeat on the high line once in 20 lifetimes.
There's not a lot of arranged variance in the song. The song was not meant to be a song that was big and show-offy. It was meant to show the more folk-like qualities to her voice, that vibe of reminiscing on past experiences. Whenever you get a look at her face, when she transitions into the chorus and she's talking about the fact that like other people may have misunderstood you, and I didn't feel like I was in touch with the rest of the world, but I knew you. And you were doing all of these beautiful things that made me feel so beautiful and worth it at the time. And she smiles looking back on those past experiences, which shows inner strength, because it's hard when it seems like all these great memories you have with a person are tainted because the relationship ends in heartbreak. Before I got married, I was in another relationship, a different relationship, all the way back when I was in high school, that lasted for like 2 years. And I made so many of my most prominent high school memories with this guy. Like, we went to both of my proms, my junior and senior prom together. We did all of these things. And when the relationship ended up not working out once we graduated and we just didn't make the transition, at the time it felt like all of those high school memories were so tainted by that heartbreak. Now looking back on it and being in a happy, wonderful place, not only with my personal life, but also just heading toward what I feel like I was meant to do in my life, all of a sudden I can look back on that and say, no, I'm going to take those good memories. And it's okay that that person was there for them. And it's okay that it didn't work out. I can still have those precious good memories. I can still smile at reminiscing on the fun experience of my prom. That heartbreak hurt, but I've moved on, and so I can take the good with the bad. It's a story that's so universally relatable to so many people. We've all experienced that erosion of our youth, or that disenchantment, bittersweet feeling we have toward the world when all of a sudden things are not as great as the movies told us they were going to be anymore. As she's reminiscing on these things, you're getting more signs of life. You're getting the symbolism of water behind her. Water's coming out of the piano. Everything's teeming with life. This was symbolizing the good phase of that relationship, the things that make her happy when she remembers them.
And when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed, you put me on and said I was your favorite.
Even the piano's covered in moss. Everything has new growth. She felt like things were really at the peak of their beauty during this time in her life.
To kiss in cars and downtown bars was all we needed. You drew stars around my scars, but now I'm bleeding. 'Cause I knew you.
Now she's in a completely different environment that seems so much less safe and so much less teeming with life. All of a sudden she's now at stormy sea, and she's vulnerable, and she's trying to tread water. The imagery switched as the lyrics in the song switched. You drew stars around my scars, and now I'm bleeding. I love that line because, oh my gosh, having that validation, that external validation from somebody, feeling like I belonged with somebody when I didn't feel like I belonged before, felt so good. And now I'm bleeding because I don't have that external validation anymore. And when I was young, I felt like that's what I needed for happiness. And now that I'm looking back on it, that was what caused the storms in my life. That was what caused this erosion. I can't stay above water without him. That feeling of I can't live without them that you get hopefully just a brief time after a heartbreak. It feels very extreme, especially for somebody that young. This is why young people really deeply feel these things, like on a really deep level, because their brains are still developing. Those feelings are very real and those experiences are very real, and she's reflecting back on them and she's talking about, oh, this was the time when it was the storm. This was the breaking point of the relationship. I have to figure out how to live without it, but it just feels impossible at this moment in time. It is possible.
Stepping on the last train marked me like a bloodstain. I knew you tried to change the ending, Peter losing Wendy. I knew you leaving like a father, running like water. When you are young, they assume you know nothing, but I knew you'd linger like a tattoo kiss. I knew you'd haunt all over my what ifs. The smell of smoke would hang around this long, 'cause I knew everything when I was young. I knew I'd curse you for the longest time, chasing shadows in the grocery line. I knew you'd miss me once the thrill expired, and you'd be standing in my front porch lot, and I knew.
She just opened up the piano again and arrived at the piano. And what's so interesting is the piano is kind of a secondary character in this music video. And I kind of feel like that symbolizes the fact that for Taylor Swift herself, there is a little bit of a part of herself in each of these songs, even if they're not like written about her firsthand experiences. But the character of Betty or Taylor Swift herself finds a certain amount of refuge in music and the expression of their art, and realizes that that's going to be used as a coping mechanism for this grief. All of those lyrics where she's saying, I knew everything when I was young. I knew that I would be chasing shadows in the grocery line. I knew that I would see you everywhere I went. She knew that she was going to have to go through all of that. And you kind of do when you go through those heartbreaks. You know, man, it's going to be tough for a while. It's going to be hard for everyday life is going to be really extra hard for a while. You also have the wisdom, hopefully, to understand that eventually that hardness will pass. But the difficulty of that and understanding that that's the experience you're going to have to go through, that's hard. It feels unbearable. Am I really going to express myself through this music? Am I really going to get to that point? Do I have the strength to get to the other side of this? Do I have the strength to climb up over this piano and use it as my safety to get back to a place that's warm and a little bit more comfortable? At the end of the day, she did, which is why the magic piano comes back.
You'd come back to me. You'd come back to me. And you'd come back to me. And you'd come back. And when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed, you put me on and said I was your favorite.
Super cool music video. She ends up back in the cabin. She ends up back where she started. The video comes full circle and she puts the literal cardigan on. There's multiple layers to that video's ending, speaking from like the character of Betty's perspective and how this story is not over yet. The song insinuates that this is truly part of a trilogy story from like Taylor's own perspective. I could imagine her, if there is truly a little piece of her in the song, which I think there is, reflecting back on that young love, and then she pulls the cardigan over herself and she ends up back in her cabin, her cozy cabin again, surrounded by all of her vintage stuff that has aged like a fine wine, just like her. She's with her music and she's alone again with her piano in a safe place. And it's just kind of this idea that music has been a form of self-expression for her that she has shared with the rest of the world. It's the way that she processes her own life experiences. That's a gift that she can give to herself, and she doesn't need a man in order to have that gift. I did hear that she is in a happy relationship right now. I'm very glad that she is keeping that relationship pretty private from the media. That relationship is nobody's business, not mine, so I won't comment on it any further. This character is wise and she's young, but she understands what she's going to go through because of these experiences, and she understands that maybe it isn't over. I hope you guys got something really cool from this video. I certainly had a lot of fun going on the nerdy journey with you guys. I absolutely love Folklore. I think it's Taylor Swift's best album. It's my favorite album personally. I like a lot of songs from a lot of her other albums, and I do appreciate Reputation and how self-aware it is, but I just really think her songwriting abilities were showcased in such a gorgeous way on this album. So let me know what you think of Taylor Swift and this song in particular, and if you have any other theories behind the symbolism in her video. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your weekend, night, whenever you happen to be watching this video. I hope to see you all around here again soon. Bye!